Welcome back to Stories by You. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode. Today, I want to welcome our special guest, Lauri Burns. She's the founder of Teen Project. Lauri's true life story of parental abuse, drugs, and prostitution landed her in and out of jail and foster homes until 13 virtual angels, each of them whom crossed her path at the exactly right time and the right moment, led her back to light. Thank you, Lauri, so much for being here on Stories by You. Everyone has a story. Please, I will turn this over to you if you can tell us more about your inspirational story from all the hurt, pain, and destruction, but also how you turned darkness into the purpose.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is a great pleasure for me. I did grow up in an abusive home. My father was sexually and physically abusive. We were pretty well off as kids. I wasn't in a bad neighborhood. I was in a nice neighborhood. We had nice things. And my father was an airline pilot. I was very suicidal and I was keeping all the secrets of my family. But at some point, there was a witness that identified that my dad was hurting me. She witnessed it and told the school counselors. And at that point, he took his handgun and hid it and told the authorities that I had it. And I was put in a ward for the criminally insane. I was 13 at that time.
Wow.
So, and I grew up Jewish, which has great significance. At age 13, we do a bat mitzvah or a bas mitzvah, and it's basically a time where you're connecting with God to take responsibility, to heal the world or whatever. But my life was going in the opposite direction. So for me, it was a spiritual downfall. And I stayed in that place until my mom found me. My mom wasn't with us anymore. She was looking for a home for herself at that point. She had already left. So when she realized I was gone and she found me in that place, I got shipped off to a group home. And I lived in the group home for a short while. But in that group home, was the first time I'd ever bonded to another human being. Up to this point, I had bonded to my dog, and that was about it. So in the group home, I finally started to bond to the other kids, like as if they were family. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't alone. And then my mom got her life together enough to ship for us kids. And they called me out of the group home to come to California. And it was just a downward spiral after that. I had no one to talk to about what had happened. And before I knew it, I was in the system. I was in the foster care system in group homes and juvenile hall, and just a spiraling of different homes that I went through. And then I aged out of foster care at 18, was pregnant before I even hit 19. And then I was trafficked. My daughter went into foster care and I spent many years on the streets.
That's a lot for 13, right? And you had to endure a lot. So when were you trafficked? How old were you?
It was after I left foster care. I was 18.
I know when you and I were speaking afterwards, just tell us more what happened after you were trafficked.
Yeah, so I was on the streets for probably 4 years and then I was abducted. I had many bad things happen. It wasn't just the abduction on this night, but this was the night that would change my life. My whole life story is called Punished for Purpose, 3 words, Punished for Purpose. And you'll know by the end of this talk why it's called that. But that has all of the details that I really don't talk much about. But January 5th, 1987, I was kidnapped and taken into the woods by gang members. And their intention was to kill me that night. And something different happened. I actually decided in the middle of the night, they had a gun. I was being brutally beaten and worse. And I decided I wanted to die. So I started screaming for them to kill me. And instead of killing me, they got scared that someone's going to hear my screaming and they beat me and left me for dead. And that was when my first angel would appear, the man that picked me up. He was driving down the canyon road in the darkness and saw my body, I guess, because I wasn't alert. I was knocked out, and he woke me up and took me to a hospital. And that would be the first of the 13 angels that turned around my life. And for the first time in my life, I trusted someone because I never trusted anyone. I normally wouldn't have even gotten in the car with him. And I did fight him when I woke up to leave me alone, but he started crying. He was this big African-American guy picked me up like I was nothing. He was a big black guy, like the guy in the Green Mile. Like that's how I seemed like nothing. He just picked me up and held me up to his face, and he was crying, and he said, please, would you please just let me help you? Please let me help you. And I trusted him enough to let him take me to a hospital. And what happened after that night was miraculous. It was like I was 23 at that point, and I was ready for my life to end. Literally ready. The memories of my childhood, my dad, losing my daughter, being on the street, all the things my body had went through. I just wanted to die. And I didn't think there was anything left to save. But God had other plans. And I'm not a religious person, as you probably know. As a matter of fact, when they told me when I got sober, I have to start praying, I was like, oh my God, well, things have been going good for a while. I definitely don't want to turn on the radar, and he knows where I'm at again. So the last thing I wanted to do was call him back. So I started praying to George Burns. I don't know. Do you know who George Burns is or why?
You can tell us about it. I would love to know.
Yeah. So George Burns played God in a movie called Oh God, but more importantly, Oh God Book 2. Oh God Book 2, I saw when I was a little girl, and God chose a little girl to save the world and start praying to God again. And if you get a chance to download it and watch it, you'll understand why this is the guy I was going to pray to, because he was very normal and not judgmental and cool to talk to. So I was praying to George. So, but I got to tell you, it doesn't matter where you pray to. Because someone once told me you got to pray to Jesus if you want your prayers answered. Well, I'm a Jew. Jesus is a Jew too, which, Jesus is cool, but why is God not going to help me? Like if my daughter called me Max or John, I would still feed her. I'm not going to like deny her. And he's the most loving guy. So it doesn't matter where you pray. I'm living proof that God will pick up his mail wherever you leave it. I went into a women's recovery home for a year. I got my daughter back out of foster care, and I started helping other women at my house. They would come over for a weekly meeting. And that is when my purpose started to unfold. One of the women that was at my home for the first time said, I can't get help like you guys because I have a 12-year-old daughter. And she was looking at all the other little ladies that were sober. And she said, my daughter's in a crack house and I can't get help because I can't leave my daughter in a crack house. And that was the first day I talked to George and said, what do you think? And felt like it was okay. And I told her I would watch her daughter, and she eventually died. And her daughter was 12. And that's where my story started, pretty much. That's where my new story started. I have taken in 46 foster kids to date. And now I realize when I was a little kid, I thought God hated me for something I did in a past life. That's why I got this crazy family and everything going on. But now I realize that God loved me so much that he blessed me, putting me on that path. Because now when I get to pick up a kid, a foster kid, and give them what I found, it's just like, I would do it all again. If you said, Lauri, would you do it all again to get here? It's like, it's not even a thought. It's like, absolutely, absolutely. But what happened was about 17 foster kids in. Now, let me back up a little bit. When I got out of the recovery home, they said I need to get a job. I didn't have any job skills. So I said I knew computers, and I didn't. And I got fired a lot, and I got hired a lot. And I saw a lot of different computer systems. So I started getting really good and taking classes and getting certified. So I was working in the computer field. And about 17 foster kids into having foster kids, I started waking up at 3 in the morning. Not 3:05, not 3:10. And let me tell you, you will have people watching this podcast that are waking up at 3 a.m. right now. Happens all the time. And I didn't know why I was waking up at 3 a.m. I thought maybe it was my sprinklers. And I went outside and looked, no, they're turning on at 6 a.m. And then I started to complain about it because I was working at a big aerospace company in LA, and my commute was like 4 hours in one day. So not sleeping with the commute was a lot. And someone told me the American Indians know, and many different spiritual groups know, that the spirits talk the loudest at 3 a.m. If you're waking up at 3 a.m., your angels or God or whoever, is protecting you is trying to tell you there's something else, something you're missing.
I'm getting
So
goosebumps because I get up 3 sometimes too.
What's that?
I get up 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes.
I know, it's crazy, right? When I wake up now at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, really? There's something else? Have I not done everything? But yeah, so you need to pay attention to that. So I started writing notes to George and dropping them in a little box saying, please tell me what my purpose is, why I'm here. Because I always knew the night on the Canyon Road when that man showed up,
Mhm.
I knew there's something else. And my mentor used to say to me, Lauri, you've got like 17, 20 kids, of course you have a purpose. And I used to say back to her, no, those kids are like my family. Those are like the kids in the group home that I grew up with. That's not a purpose. That's just my family. That's like you going to get your sister or brother. That's your personal sphere, right?
Yeah.
I'll talk about that in a minute. But I said there's something else I'm supposed to do. And what happened when I started dropping notes is all these coincidences. I get invited to all these meetings, how to build a boys' town. I get invited to serve on the foster care advisory board for our county, which let me tell you, they didn't even want to prove me to be a foster mom. When I first applied, when that little girl showed up at my house, they said, absolutely not. Look at your record. I was one of the worst juvenile delinquents in this county. They were like, we're not going to make you a foster mom unless you get 7 years clean and sober. Well, 7 years clean and sober, I was still getting kids dropped off at my house and they approved me, right? So here I am. Now they want me to serve on the board for the county. So
Wow.
something's changed. And I think what happened is they saw that I was doing better with the worst kids than any other foster parent because I was one of the worst kids. I don't know. It's not that hard to figure out, right? They like me, they know they could trust me, and I'm not hard on them because I knew what it was like. But
Praise God.
what I found out was kids, I should say, girls and boys living foster care were going to be homeless on their 18th birthday. 65% of foster kids throughout the nation in the 80s were homeless on their 18th birthday. And I was devastated. I was on fire. I didn't immediately connect that this is my purpose at all. I was just pissed. And I thought, oh my God, it wasn't my bad luck. It was supposed to happen like this. Foster kids don't have a place to go on their 18th birthday. The check to the family stops. They want to fill the bed with a new check and you have nowhere to go. So you go to the streets, right? And then I found out that 60% of the trafficking victims in the United States are coming from foster care. So I started a little charity on LegalZoom for a couple $100 with my best friend. I was working in tech in aerospace and she was a realtor. And you have your personal sphere, like your family, your friends, people around you, maybe your coworkers, and you do good and you help the people in that sphere. That's great, helping in your personal sphere. But when you go outside of your personal sphere and you start helping people that you don't know and there's no ROI on it and you're not going to get anything out of it, you're just doing it because you want to help the world,
Yeah.
something different happens. Like if you could imagine like how your heart pumps blood and your lungs are feeding air to your body, everything in your body is working, your cells, your blood, your white blood, your red blood. You don't even think about it. We just, it's all working. We don't think about it. We go on about our day, right? But like a toaster being plugged in, when
Exactly.
something bad happens and your life is in danger, you're like, oh my God, praying all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, I was plugged into something that I'm not plugged into anymore, right? So you all of a sudden start praying. Even people that don't believe in God start praying to
Yeah.
something, right? So when you start giving to the universe outside of your personal sphere, much like organs in your body, something, whether it be God or angels in the universe, realizes there's a new organ that's feeding the body of the universe and starts to feed you so that you can continue to help. So if your true integrity is there just to help, all of a sudden you're going to find more and more and more coming your way, and things you're not even looking for or asking for. Things are just going to start dropping in your lap. So what happened was I started this little charity. We figured we'd help a couple kids, and we started asking for money, to help kids. We didn't even really know how we were going to help them. Just feed them, maybe bring them clothes, maybe rent them a room. And people started giving us tens and 20s, and we had a couple, I think we cried on our way to the Chase Bank. We had about $400 and we were crying because people were trusting us to do this thing. And we felt like people are actually going to give us money to help foster kids. This is beautiful.
Mhm.
10 months later, we had $180,000 in our bank account. And I
Wow.
was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And she said, well, I'm a realtor. Let's buy a house. Let's buy a house. So we bought this little 3-bedroom house, and people that were listening to us in the community, guys, women that ran philanthropy to a certain extent, started showing up and said, no, this 3-bedroom house isn't good enough. They literally knocked it down and built this, it was an old cruddy 3-bedroom house, but it was all we could afford. It was like 300,000. And they built it into a brand new 6-bedroom house, right? And we start moving girls in from the street and saying, what were your dreams before they got taken away? What were your dreams before you knew you were going to be homeless after foster care? And whatever it was, one girl wanted to go to FITM. We did that. Another girl wanted to be an engineer. We took care of that. So anything, one of the little girls wanted to be a doctor because she was hit by a car when she was a little kid and she was alone. She was 4 and she was in the hospital for a year. And when they called her parents, nobody came. So, and she ended up in foster care, and she said the nurses and the doctors were my only form of love as a child. I never knew love before that. So I want to be there when kids come in the emergency room. So she started doing that. And so that was going beautifully, right? And I'm still working full time. She's still working full time. And then someone said, Lauri, you need to come down to Venice Beach. There's a bunch of homeless kids on Venice Beach. Well, I live in Orange County. That's kind of far. And at first, and here's the thing, when you start saying yes to the universe and it starts feeding you, you have to be, how should I say it? You have to be without excuses. You have to be open. So while my head is saying that's too far, I don't want to go there on the weekend. What am I going to do in Venice Beach? I live so far. I can't do anything about Venice Beach. Still, my body and my mouth say yes. So I go to Venice Beach and I see there are hundreds of homeless kids all over the street, and they are feeding them pizza and giving them food, but sending them back to the street. And I was so upset. I started talking about what we could do in Venice Beach. And before I knew it, someone donated a building right on the sand, right under the Venice sign, and said, build it, Lauri, and they will come, and gave me the keys to this magnificent building. So I called a local decorator and said, can you help me? And this is how it happens. Like, everything is magical because everything's just working. And she said, I just decorated a 17-room shelter with 17 of my friends, and I bet you they'd all like to help you. I'm going to come by and get the keys, and you just come back when we're done. Well, I came back and there was an office, a TV room, a therapy room. There was a beautiful Italian white kitchen built in. There was no kitchen there. It was just a warehouse, a full kitchen, all the pantry stuff with food, the fridge stuff with food. This designer, Charmian Neathart, that lives out there, donated the kitchen. There was a bathroom, a very modern, it was the most modern, upscale, colorful, beautiful drop-in center I've ever seen in my life. So now we have thousands of kids coming in, like hundreds by the day, but thousands, right? So my tech team at work, at my aerospace company, the guys that work for me, one of them says, Lauri, I could build almost like a hotels.com, so you could see all the shelters in the United States, and we could start to figure out where we could send these kids to get them help, because we were renting rooms. But he said there's got to be a better way. We can find transitional living, we can find rehab, we can find, so he did that. He created it online, and then I kept on going. We had one volunteer working there, and then I told him one day, I said, Matthew, homeless kids would rather have a cell phone than a sandwich. Their kids need to be connected to technology, today's kids. And he said, well, Lauri, I could make it work on the cell phone where they could text the word shelter and the zip code, and it'll return a shelter to their phone within 40 seconds. And he said, but it's going to take me like 3 weeks, and it'd be like $15,000. And I'm like, Matthew, I don't have $15,000. I spent every dime of what I had on that little house. Well, the next day I went to my UPS to get my mail, and there was a FedEx envelope. As I was leaving, they were like, hey, are you the charity lady? I'm like, yeah, I guess you could call me that. And the guy goes, we have a FedEx envelope, needs to be signed for. So I sign it, I open it, and it's from some stranger, and it says, hey, I was going to send your charity a donation of $10,000 last year, and I forgot. And it's almost this year, so I'm sending you $20,000. I hope you do something good with it. Yes. So I'm like, oh my God, Matthew, I got the $15,000. All of a sudden, texting's working all over the United States, right? Then I have these friends in LA because I do a lot of speaking engagements in LA, right? So one of them's like a billionaire. His family owns a big fund. One of the funds that's in your 401k is derived from his family, and another one's a movie star. And both of them asked me separately, they don't know each other, that they wanted to create a charity where they could have 100 beds. So I thought, well, since these guys want to do the same thing, I'll introduce them to each other. So I introduced them to each other, and lo and behold, they're going at it. They want to do it together, right? They're like, one of them says, I'll put in 1.5 million. The other one says, well, I'll put in 1.5 million. and they say, Lauri, go out and find a building for 20 to $25,000 a month. And they asked me to do their corporate docs, their, their nonprofit. I did everything, their website, their cards, their nonprofit, their corporation. And I went out to look for a building. Now the actor was like, I want to get a big warehouse with 100 beds in it, which sounded crazy because you can't put beds in a warehouse. You have to, there's zoning and all kinds of issues with that, but he wouldn't have it. He wouldn't listen to me. The other guy said, I want to find an old treatment center or something that already has 100 beds, which sounded a little more logical. And let's just revive it. So they wouldn't agree. That was the first meeting. They would not agree. So I said, okay, I'm going to look at every warehouse and every treatment center until we find what you guys want. 3 weeks later, I find a warehouse connected to a treatment center that has 100 beds, owned by the same lady, both for lease, both on the same footprint lot. Connected to each other.
Crazy.
I'm like, yeah, it's crazy. That's what my new book, Notes to George, which will be out in about 3 months, goes through every crazy story, because I can only tell you so many on this call. But I get the building. I'm on their board because it was just us. So you have to have at least 3 on the board to break a tie, right? So I signed the lease for $20,000 and a cost of living increase. And they're like, that's fine. And lo and behold, right after I sign it, right after we do our fundraiser, the billionaire guy has a health problem that almost cost him his life. And he says, Lauri, his parents said, he obviously can't do this anymore. He's got bigger problems going on. So they gave me first, last, and deposit, and he was gone. And then the movie star got some kind of arrangement back where he lived in another country, and he was gone. Oh, and I just signed a 20-year lease, me, with my name on it, $20,000 a month. And I am like, oh my God, I didn't realize when I signed it, they'd both be gone at some point. So I don't have $20,000 a month. And at that point, I was at work one day and a man called my phone at work, and I just hit the speaker phone. I'm just sitting in my office. And he said, Lauri, I just moved into town. My name's Paul. I'm an investor. I sold my investment company and I help foster kids. And I need to find a new charity to help here in LA. And I've been asking people, and they all say, Lauri Burns was a foster kid. So he says, instead of meeting you, I got your book, Punished for Purpose, off Amazon, and I read it. And I want to help you. And here I am. I'm already stressed out about this big place I just rented. And I'm like, I don't know, Paul. Like, how do you want to help? And he said, I don't know. And I said, no. And this is true. If you're listening, everyone knows how they're supposed to help. Some people just don't want to do it, or they don't want to listen because they don't agree. Okay. But when you listen and you say yes, something different happens, right? So I said, Paul, everyone knows how they're supposed to help. Like if you're an accountant, maybe you help the kids with that. If you know how to sew, you know what I mean? It's just like, you know what you have that you're supposed to give. You already know that. So if you don't know, maybe you should pray about it and then call me back. And he said, you know what, Lauri, I do know how I'm supposed to help you. I'm going to wire you $500,000 today. You'll probably get it tomorrow. And I have a feeling that you're going to do something good with it. And at first I was like, oh yeah, some stranger that calls me on a phone is going to wire me $500,000 to my charity account. I'm not so sure. So I didn't want to get too excited because it might've been a hoax. Next day I log into Chase. There's $500,000 in my account. I'm like, oh my God, I called him back. I'm like, oh my God, Paul, you really did it. You need to meet me at this building I just rented. And he walked through the building with me. He's got kind of like this. He's a little man. He's walking like this with his hands, like thinking. And he goes, yes, Lauri, we could open this place and you could start saving girls here and do exactly what you do. And I'm like, yeah, I can hire the staff. We're going to have a great team.
Amazing.
And he called me back later on that day. And he said, you know what, Lauri? No, it was the next day he called me. He said, I've been thinking about it. I can't contribute $500,000 to a place where the charity owner doesn't even work. You work at this tech job thing, and now I'm going to donate over there and you're not even working there. And I said, well, yeah, I'm going to donate. I'm going to help you. I'm a project manager by trade, and I'm an engineer. I can help you. I can build teams. I've built teams for years. You know what I mean? That's what I've been doing. And I'll make it successful. I do budgets and it schedules and everything. It'll be great, And I'm a certified project manager. And he said, Lauri, no, like, I'll tell you what, I'll donate another $500,000 today if you quit your job. So now he's up to $1 million, but I love my job. I love tech. So I said, you know what, Paul, there's just something about me that I don't like the thought of me taking charity money for a living. That doesn't sound good. Like, think of how many kids could be helped with $1 million. Now, if I take a salary out of that, now there's less kids help. How about if I just stay here, make sure it's going to run perfectly, hire the right people, and I donate too, which is what I do anyway. And he said, you know what, Lauri, I'm going to give you $1 million and loan you 250,000 for the next 30 years so that you don't have this kid guilt thing. But I'm giving you $1,250,000 today, but you need to quit your job. So I was like, oh my, okay, I guess I'm quitting my job. So I gave notice, and we started saving girls immediately and moving them into those beds, right? Problem is, if you haven't already realized it, we have a warehouse. The warehouse is costing us $9,000 a month, and it's empty. And there's no way. I've tried to lease it to churches, get rid of it every way I can. And there's no one that wants to lease it for anything. So that we're talking years at $9,000 a month. And I'm like, what are you doing, God? Like, this is 9,000. This is like $100,000 a year that we're wasting. So I was kind of pissed off at the actor for ever suggesting it, and for God not helping us to get rid of it. But I got to tell you, I think I was waiting for a speedboat to pull in from God, and he was working an aircraft carrier, right? So he was coming in a lot slower than I would have wanted it, but he was coming. I just not on my time, right? So all of a sudden, one day I'm sitting at my desk and raising $100,000 a month by myself just to get these girls in the 100-bed facility taken care of. And I get this envelope from the Department of Mental Health, and I open it, and it says, we're looking for agencies, nonprofits that would be interested in opening a crisis center, kind of like a hospital setting with psychiatric care for people that have tried to commit suicide or are having a mental break. And at that point, and at the very end, it said you have to have a building that's leased for 20 years that's not in use. And I'm like, what? Anyway, long story short, we got awarded a grant for $50 million to open that up as a hospital. And I can keep on going, but we've only got like 10 minutes left.
I know.
And my new book, Notes to George, is about everything that's happened since then. But we've raised $62 million. We are Tri-County, LA, Orange County, and Riverside right now. And the most magnificent life I ever could have imagined. And it all came from saying yes to the universe, from starting to activate the universal karma, because everyone's good in their personal life. I think not everyone. Okay, so Jeffrey Dahmer, not so good, but you know what I mean? Like, everyone's pretty good. Like, you feel good if you're nice to your sister, your kids, your mom, but that's your personal sphere.
Exactly.
You're already responsible at some level for your personal sphere, but what happens when you start giving just to give?
Exactly.
Just to see what will happen if you change this world. Like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. What happens then? Well, if you want to see what happens, start saying yes.
Exactly. I was gonna say,
that's my message.
Definitely alive, and you have found your purpose. So everyone who's watching, I want to make sure, don't forget Lauri's book. It's called Punished for Purpose. Like she said, 3 words. Punished for Purpose on Amazon. So get books today to know more about it. If you don't have enough information on this podcast because of time, please, you can reach out to Lauri directly. I will create all the links below in the comment section. But lastly, Lauri, I just want to spend a few minutes and ask you this last question that's been really on my heart, and so many people that I know that come to me and ask the same question. And I want to see what you have to say to everyone who's watching. So how can youth, people that are dealing with something similar that you went through, how can they protect themselves and also look out for their friends and family from being trafficked?
It's very hard because pimps and people like that, they look for girls that have daddy issues, girls that need saving, right? And the problem is, girls that were like me aren't really looking out to take care of themselves. They don't have any self-esteem. They aren't caring for themselves. It just, that's a very hard thing. If you're a young girl and you haven't been through a lot and you do have self-esteem, you don't want to put pictures of yourself on Instagram and TikTok being sexy with filters, looking older, and accepting invites. Because I don't know if you saw the girl that was 15 that was flirting with someone online and thought it was a young boy, because you can pretend to be anyone online.
Sure.
And it turns out to be a police officer from back east. And he was so obsessed with her, he came to California and killed her entire family to kidnap her. Right. And there are many stories like that. If you think you're safe online, you're wrong. And most kids are being trafficked online. So I'd say more in the parents, to the parents, I'd want to say something, not rather than not the kids, because the kids are wowed about money. Like someone says, oh my God, this picture's great, I'll start sending you $100 a picture. The kid's going to do it. Unfortunately, most kids are going to do it. And that's how they end up getting trafficked. You know, you may not share your location, but they're smarter than that. They can tell where you are from your pictures, right?
Yeah,
Just from the background.
exactly.
So, if you're a parent, I would say put a key logger on your kid's computer and phone. And parents say to me all the time, I don't want my kids to think I don't trust them. I'm like, then have a real conversation with them, like I have with my foster kids, and say, you know what? I'm not going to care if you cuss or flirt with boys or what you do, really. But if you are missing, I get the opportunity to roll back the tape and see who you were talking to so I can come and rescue you if I have a key logger on there. If you don't have it on there, and your kid is missing all of a sudden, it's all over the internet, missing kids. You've
Thank,
got nothing to look at, right?
thank
So
you.
my kids have always had the key logger on.
Mm-hmm. No, this is very important conversations, and I think to be talking more to your kids. I don't have a daughter per se for myself. I have a son, but I still have those conversations even with my son. Lauri, thank you so much again. Thank you for all the people watching, all of the followers.
Thank you for having me. I also wanted to tell you that we're making the movie based on the book. We just had the call before this call was the team that's working on the movie. So
so we need to bring you back.
yeah.
So this is not going to be the end. If we can get Lauri back on the channel, I know she's busy, but I do appreciate you. If you haven't already, subscribe so you get notified for any future podcasts.